Hey everybody, and welcome back to the board meeting. Today we're going to be talking about 11 different games. And these are 11 games that I use to teach particular mechanisms to people who haven't learned that mechanism in a different game. And I think they're just really good gateway style games for these particular mechanisms. Like, oh, you haven't tried this type of game? Well, let me break out this one, and it's going to be a really simple game. And then maybe when we play a more complex game that uses that mechanism, you're going to get into that game a whole lot easier than you would if you hadn't played that one. And of course, you can stop at these games. You don't have to go and play more complex games using these mechanisms. These are great games on their own, but I think this is a really good way if you want to play a little bit more complex games using this mechanism. This is a good stepping stone into that particular field. So let us start. And the first mechanism we're going to be talking about, and a couple of these games are going to have multiple mechanisms that I think it's really good for gateway style games. And the first one we're talking about, though, is just worker placement. Now, what is worker placement? Worker placement is when you will have certain workers, and they're your people who are going to go do your actions for you. So you're going to put these workers on different action spots that are on around the board, and those action spots are going to obtain you something, maybe some resources or doing specific things. So you're going to put those workers on these spots and get whatever the reward for putting your worker on that spot is. You're sending that person to go do work for you. And the game that we're talking about today is Lords of Waterdeep. Now, this is an old game. I would say it's a classic game at this point. And it's a very simple, very straightforward worker placement game. You go to this spot and you get 2 cubes of this resource. You're going to try to be using those resources to accomplish whatever your goals are. You might need like 3 orange cubes and 2 black cubes or something in order to turn in these specific goals that you're trying to do. And you're just going to these spots and to get those resources to do those. Throughout the game, it's going to get a little more complex because you're going to get more and more spots that open up that are going to be a little bit more complex, which is a good thing because, you know, at the start of the game, you only have a couple of these spots and they're very basic, very simple, very straightforward. And throughout the game, you get a little bit more spots that are a little bit more complex, and it sort of teaches you going through the game. And so yes, worker placement game gets Lords of Waterdeep. Going to our next one. Our next one is for your push your luck mechanism. And the game I picked for this one is Push. Push is a very simple card game where you are just going to be pushing your luck by drawing these cards. And you can put these cards that have colors and numbers on them. You can put your cards in 3 different columns, but you can't push a card in the same column that is the same color or is the same number. And so you might have, 3 purples in all of the columns, and you might have all your 3 slots filled for those columns. And that's where the push your luck element comes into this. You can either continue playing these and hoping that you don't, draw a purple or a 3 that would make you bust, or you can pass and take the rewards that you have right then and there. And I think it's a great way for, you to learn this game. Probably the most popular push your luck game would be the Quacks of Quedlingberg, a tough game. But this is much simpler than that, even though Quacks is pretty simple as well. It's not a heavy game, but this is a very light game, very fast-paced, great way to introduce people to the push your luck mechanism. Next, we're going on to is a game that I think is good for a couple different mechanisms. This is good for set collection and drafting. This is Sushi Go. Now, what is drafting? Drafting is usually when you have a group of something, and you're going to pick one thing out of these groups of things, and that's going to be yours, and then everybody else is going to have a chance of that. And in this game, you're going to have a hand of cards. You're going to pick one and pass the other cards to your neighbors, and then you're just continuing to pass these cards along, picking one card at a time. And the set collection in this one comes from these cards, where set collection in general is you get a group of things, and the more of that thing that you get, it's going to be worth more points. Or maybe you get a variety of things, and the more variety that you have of things, it's going to be worth points in that way. It's some kind of collection of sets that you have. And Sushi Go is great for that too, because it's a very simple set collection. It's like, oh, if you have 2 of these cards, it's worth 3. If you have 3 of them, it's worth 5, and so on and so forth. And all of the points are listed right there on the card, and it's very, very straightforward. It tells you exactly how each of these cards are going to score. So yes, Sushi Go is going to get set collection and drafting. On to the next mechanism, and this one is going to be good for deck building and racing. This game is the Quest for El Dorado. What is deck building? Deck building is a mechanism where you start with a deck of cards. And they're usually very simple, very easy cards. And throughout the game, you're going to add new cards, better cards to that deck, and you're just going to be going through that deck. A lot of times in deck building games, you're going to be getting rid of cards, getting rid of your basic cards so that your better cards will come out more often. And that's exactly what the Quest for El Dorado does. In this game, though, it is a racing game, meaning you're going to be racing to some kind of endpoint. In this, you're racing to El Dorado against the other people who are playing. So you're playing out these cards in your hand that are, certain terrain type, basically. And you're going to be moving along the terrain type with these cards that you're playing out through that deck building process. And it's a very, very fun game. I've played it 3-4 dozen times now over the years. It gets broken out every couple months, and it's very simple. It's very easy to get back into. So yes, for deck building and racing, you get the Quest for El Dorado. Going to the next one. The next one does action points and cooperative. Now, cooperative games seem to go hand in hand with action point games. And, cooperation games are just you're working with other people to accomplish a certain goal to win the game as a group or lose together as a group. Now, action points are you get a certain number of action points at the start of each of your turns. And like I said, a lot of cooperative games do this. Like, you have 4 action points that you can spend any way that you want to, and you're going to do these actions. Each of these actions is going to cost a point or 2 or whatever the system is. And, moving might cost you a point. Doing this particular action is going to cost you a point. Doing whatever costs you points to do whatever you're trying to do to facilitate the game. And the game that we're going to be talking about is Forbidden Island. It's a very simple gateway-style game from the person, Matt Leacock, who designed Pandemic, one of my favorite all-time cooperative games. This is a simpler version of Pandemic, basically, and you're just working together to get off of this sinking island. That this island is sinking, and you have to go get a couple of the treasures out before the island completely sinks. And it's a fun game. I've really enjoyed it. I no longer own it, actually, but I will play this anytime, and it's a great way to introduce people to that action point system and to play a cooperative game with people. So yes, action points and cooperative gets Forbidden Island. Next, we're going on auctions. Auctions. What are auctions? Now, auctions, everybody knows what an auction is. Really, it's you are bidding to obtain something. This game is for sale. It is a simple card game where there are 2 phases for the game. The first phase is you're going to be auctioning to buying these particular houses, these estates. And you have so much money at the start of the game, and you're going to be trying to buy the best estate each round or so to use in a later round to get more points, basically. It's fun, fast, very simple, great way to introduce people to auctions. So auction games get for sale. Next mechanism we're talking about is pattern building / tile laying, because a lot of them go hand in hand. Pattern building was pattern building. You're trying to lay out these cards or tiles for tile laying in a certain manner, in a certain particular order, in order to score points for adjacency rules or something like that. The game we're talking about today is Ecosystem. Ecosystem also uses drafting, so you could have used this game for drafting as well. But the game is very simple, and you're just going to be drafting these cards and laying them into this grid. A lot of the cards that you have in front of you are going to get you points for adjacency rules. This card wants to be next to this card in order to score points. And there are actually 3 different ecosystem games in this trilogy of games now, but they are very simple, straightforward pattern building games. It is simple, but the scoring is a little bit complex. It's one of those games that's light rules, but it has some depth to the game, and it's a system that I've really liked over the last few years. So pattern building and tile laying is ecosystem. Going to the next one. Next one is negotiating. What is negotiating? Negotiating in games is usually when you're negotiating with someone you're going to give them something in order for them to give you something of value as well. In the game we're talking about today is Sheriff of Nottingham. This is a game where you're basically trying to smuggle goods into this other town, and there is a sheriff who's at the border of the town inspecting bags, and he might catch you smuggling things, but you can try to bribe that sheriff, negotiate with him to not look in your bag, to not grab your bad stuff that you are bringing into the town. So you're negotiating with him back and forth, and maybe things work out, maybe things don't. But it's a fun game, very simple. It's very like raucous game, a lot of laughter, a lot of impersonating different things. So yes, for negotiating, we got Sheriff of Nottingham. Going to the next one, the next mechanism, whatever you want to say, is the hit and roll mechanism. Now, a lot of social deduction games use this, where people are certain roles, and those roles are going to need you to accomplish certain things. If you're this role, you need to do this. If you're this role, you need to do this. This one is a very fast-paced hit and roll game where you're constantly changing your role, actually. And this is Love Letter. Now, in Love Letter, you have one card. That's your person that you are playing as at the moment. But on your turn, you're going to pick up another card off of the deck, and now you are going to play one of those cards. And the card that you play is going to give you some kind of action. The card that you didn't play is who your person is at the moment. And a lot of times, the point is to have the highest card at the end of the round, or to be the last person alive at the end of each round. And you're trying to deduce who the other characters, who the other players are. And you're going to get cards that are going to let you try to kill certain people. You're like, okay, I think you're this person. And if you guess right, if you're the guard, you get a guess. And if you're right, you kill them and they're out of that round. And, it's a very fast-paced hidden movement game, or hidden roll game. And it's good for teaching that. After you play this, you can get into like Secret Hitler or Renaissance or Werewolf or all of those other ones. But this is like the simplest one that I know of, really. This and Coup. But yeah, hidden rolls is Love Letter. Going to the next one. The next one is route building. And what is route building? Route building is usually when you're building a route with certain things, most of the time trains. And the most popular one of these games is obviously Ticket to Ride. I'm not going with Ticket to Ride. I'm going with a simpler game than that, and this is Caesar's Empire. This is simpler, and it is faster than Ticket to Ride. Even though Ticket to Ride is very simple as well, this plays in a third or a fourth of the time that Ticket to Ride does. This one, you're just building off of other people's routes or your own routes and getting points for those. And you're just laying out those trains, and all these trains lead back to Rome. Everybody who is part of that route gets a point for every road or every train. And there are roads in this one, but every thing that they have on the board that is connecting to Rome. So you might place out one, and then you have two other roads in that, so you get 3 points. Someone else might have two on that connecting road to Rome, so they're going to get 2 points. And there is a little bit of set collection in this as well. It's a great game and plays much faster than Ticket to Ride. So this is the one that I would always recommend before Ticket to Ride even. So yes, route building is Caesar's Empire. And going on to our last mechanism we're talking about today, and that is the real-time game. Real-time games are games that you are doing something in real time, in a fast-paced manner. You have a certain amount of time to try to accomplish your goals. You have like 10 minutes. You have to do this or this or this. In the game we're talking about today is 5 Minute Marvel. 5 Minute Marvel is sort of almost a campaign-style game, sort of, where you have 5 minutes to defeat the villain of whoever you're versing at the moment. you are going to go through this deck and try to defeat these little minions of the villain by playing out cards as fast as you can. And it's very simple, where to defeat them, you just have to play cards that have a certain symbol on them. So you're constantly going as fast as you can, going with other people. You have one little special ability for each of these people, but you're just playing these cards fast paced. It is crazy. It's fun. It's 5 minutes at most. Or, you know, like if you're like me, we usually play through the whole campaign box, which takes like an hour maybe. But I've played through the box several times. It's a good time. It's one that I highly recommend. So yeah, real-time game is 5 Minute Marvel. And those are all the games that I think are really good at introducing specific mechanisms to people. These are the ones that I like to break out to introduce people to deck building, to introduce people to worker placement, to introduce people to these different mechanisms. And so they have a handle, a grasp on these different types of mechanisms. But yes, that will complete this video, so make sure to comment down below what are some of your favorite games in different mechanisms to teach people those particular mechanisms. Either way, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe to see more weekly content from me, Shane, at the board meeting in the future. Hope you all have an amazing day. Take care.